you can't do everything at once. Like everyone wants to be I will say social media makes it seem like a woman is a CEO, leads music at our church, is a politician, is a mom, a mother, makes whole wheat pancakes for her kids every Saturday morning. She doesn't. I'm just here to tell you, like, she doesn't. I know a lot of incredible moms, the best moms. You can't do all those things. You have to choose what is most important to you in this season.
Welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. Today we have an exciting episode. We have Jena Powell here on set. She is from Ohio and served on their legislature up until January, where her term ended. She started college when she was 13, and she has built up an incredible career as an entrepreneur and is now a wife and mom. And we are excited for you to hear her insights on the state of U.S. politics, especially on the state end of things, and her insights on how women can have it all just in different seasons of life. So hope you enjoy.
Well, Jena, thank you so much for coming on today. We're so excited and happy to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. It's great to be here. I'm excited for this conversation. So, I'm Jena. I was born and raised in Ohio, Darke County, Ohio, if you've ever been. It's a little small town of not very many people at all. But yeah, born and raised, I was one of 7 kids growing up and raised in a conservative home. And I was always very passionate about, conservative values. I grew up a very homeschool family, listening to Adventures in the Odyssey, all that kind of thing. And but my family really wasn't political. But I grew up believing like, hey, this is truth. This is from the Word of God. We believe in the American dream and we want to fight for it in ways that my parents knew how. And that was by being involved in their church and raising kids that loved the Lord and loved America. So kind of fast forward, I have served 6 years in the Ohio legislature, which has been amazing. I just finished my term in January. And now I am a wife, a mother, and a business owner.
I love that. That's amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah, I think one of the standout things, the Ohio legislature, what were some things in there that kind of surprised you or things, that kind of just made an impact on you when you were serving your term? Because you just finished, so it's very fresh, very new. What would you offer
So when you go into office, I think one of the things is like you want to make an impact, but you don't actually know if you're able to, right? I think that's what a lot of people ask of like, was my time valuable and did I make a difference, right? I think that's what most people ask wherever they are, whether it's in business or politics. And I think in politics, there is great evil. Like we see that across the board, but there's also great good that can be done, right? The world changes through good policy. And so, my time in politics, we were able to pass the heartbeat bill, which says that at the time a heartbeat is detected in the womb, a child is protected in the state of Ohio. I was the primary sponsor of Save Women's Sports in our state. We were the second state in the nation to introduce that piece of legislation. And, I knew I was a freshman and I thought to myself, like, this is going to be a slam dunk win. It's going to be easy. And now in 2025, like people understand like men don't belong in women's sports. But if you go back to 2019, when we first introduced it, not only were Democrats like, I don't know why we need this, but also a lot of Republicans. It took a lot of education for them to understand like this is a problem. It's not just a made up Republican problem, but is a national problem. It's going to become a lot worse. So, we were able to introduce that piece of legislation. And, in my mind as freshman legislator, we thought, we're going to get it done quickly. But it actually took all 6 years. Actually, it was 5 years to get that piece of legislation done. We ended up, when you're a freshman legislator, you're like trying to move it through the process and you keep getting blocked and you kind of feel like an idiot. You're like, I should have this done. What am I doing wrong? But I felt very vindicated when our piece of legislation was vetoed by the governor. So that kind of gave me room to be like, the governor never wanted this and he was pushing against it every step of the way. But, with hard times like that comes great glory and great wins. When we came back into an emergency session and we overrode the veto on that piece of legislation, which was really fun. That moment was huge. We'd worked on it for years. Yeah. There was a lot of momentum. And ultimately, like it is about protecting women and protecting girls' sports, protecting girls' private spaces. So I think like those are just some of the things where when you go into office and when you run for office, you have all these big ideas. You believe in something, but there's always that nagging question of like, can I make that idea a reality? And I think I would tell anyone, whether they're thinking about running for office or getting involved in politics, is that like, your voice does make a difference. Like you have the ability to say, this is what I believe, and I'm going to do everything I can to move that marker, whether it's, you know, a mile or 20 miles to where you need to go. So it's been really cool. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do that.
How old were you when you were a freshman in the legislature in Ohio?
I had just turned 25 years old. So
Wow.
That's
impressive.
It was amazing. So yeah, I just turned 25 years old. You know, everyone there is mostly, I would say, in their 50s to 60s. So I was definitely by far the youngest. I was still in Ohio to this day, the youngest ever elected female in our state.
Wow,
so,
that's so impressive.
Yeah, so it's amazing. And you know, I think a lot of people are scared of like, oh, can I do it young, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, it's like, if you're young and you know what you believe and you know why you believe it, well, then get the team together and give it your all. Like, what do you have to lose? Because you can make a big difference.
Yeah. What was that springboard, do you think, when you were younger? You were saying you were homeschooled from a big family.
Mm-hmm.
What did your childhood kind of look like leading up to that point to make that big decision to get into politics? What was that foundation that you had that was able to prepare you to do something so impressive at such a young age?
Yeah, that's a great. My parents are truly incredible. Like, I really give it to my mom and my dad. They invested in us in so many ways. I always say, like, they sacrificed everything so that we could have a better life. My mom didn't have the opportunity of going to college. And so she made sure that we had the opportunity. And so when I was 13 years old, I started my first business college class. Which is crazy. They were like, hey, my dad really was like, hey, you can do anything as long as it's business marketing, business management, business finance. So they really knew, like, we were from an entrepreneurial family. And so they're like, hey, we want you to go into business. We want you to dig into that. And so I started some different college business classes, and I took them slow, you know, but I started learning like the fundamentals of, if you have an idea, you can make that a reality through a business, right? And I always tell people all the time, like, entrepreneurship is actually not that different than politics and being in the government, right? So the government is, I see a problem in my community, and I'm going to solve that through writing a piece of legislation and then moving it through the process of the legislature. Very similar as having a business, right? You see a need in the market, you then create some kind of item or program, and then you go and sell it. So I'd say it's very similar in the fact of like an idea, a problem, a solution. And so, you know, I really kind of had that foundation of going, what is the problem and how do we come up with a solution? And so that's like just some of the ways, like my parents really drilling it into us of like, you can make a difference no matter your age. And they gave me a lot of different opportunities. And so when I was younger, I had the opportunity of going to Europe. I had some great opportunities. One of the times I was there, I had a really incredible story and just an incredible conversation with a man who was looking for work in America. And through, you know, a lot of broken English and conversation back and forth, you know, he looked at me and he's like, hey, here's my number. If you go back to America and there's a job, can you call me? Because I want to work in America. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, I asked him, I said, why do you want to work in America? And he looks at me and he says, because America is unlike anywhere else in the world. And I would give up everything so that I can come to America. And that really hit me because I'm like, you know, I'm 20 some years old at the time, and you get used to America. You get used to how incredible and how incredible it truly is to the rest of the world. And so that really instilled in me of like, we need to keep America truly as beautiful and as great as it's always been.
Wow.
Yeah. That's incredible. And that your story just now with the man in Europe, that really like puts into perspective things that I think a lot of young Americans, a lot of Gen Z people need to hear, and just being grateful for our country and things like that. So that's amazing. And I think, is there anything that you learned in the entrepreneurship type of world that, I don't know, there's a whole culture now of like the trad wife versus the boss babe kind of just idea. Is there anything you can offer after, you know, because you're a mom now, you were an entrepreneur before and still are an entrepreneur. Is there anything you can offer kind of on that topic?
Yeah, so that is a topic I've been thinking a lot about. And I think one of the things that sparked that thought in my head, right, is like, as women, like, there are so many different paths forward right now. And last December, I had my newborn baby on the house floor. We were taking votes. We were passing budgets. It was, you know, crazy time. I had to get my baby up early. He's only a couple months old. I'm getting him out of bed, putting him into his car seat, taking him to the Statehouse, juggling my job, the baby, a newborn, and all of that. And I remember standing on the house floor and kind of looking around, and all of these conversations are flooding in my head. And for years, women had always told me, they were like, you can do everything. You can be anything you want to be. You can, break any glass ceiling. And I stood there and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like we as women, like we can do a lot of things, but you can't do everything at one time. And I think that's what's interesting when you take a look at boss babe culture and trad wife life, like there's two very polar opposite views. Millennials believe, they grew up in the boss babe life, right? You can grab your briefcase, you can put on that suit, you can be married, you can have a strong marriage, you can have the child, and you can have the title at your company. And I think a lot of people are looking at these millennial age women and looking and going, you're not having it all. Your marriage is falling apart. You never get to see your children because they're actually raised in a daycare. And is the title really worth it because you're worn out, exhausted, and unhappy? So then, enters Gen Z. And Gen Z, what we're seeing online is the opposite extreme, which is trad wife life, right? Mm-hmm. Where a lot of these women, it's being pushed in the extreme on social media that goes, raise chickens at home, bake sourdough. Mm-hmm. You don't have to vote if you don't want to. Your husband can have all the political views. You don't have to make money, and you don't even have to care or think about what you spend on your credit card. And it's like these polar opposite views that society is showing these women and putting them up as like, this is a healthy woman. And I think like what I stood there on the Statehouse floor and thought was, neither of these really make sense. Like, I think I would like to pose a different viewpoint for women in today's world and saying, maybe it's not trad wife life, and maybe it's not boss babe life, but maybe it's looking at life as seasons, right? When I was new in the legislature, I was 25 years old. I was single and had no children. I had the ability, and the Lord blessed me with opening all these doors so that I could spend my time and my resources and my effort on changing policy and focusing on that 100%. But I also knew that once I had a child and my husband, that maybe that season of my life didn't best suit the gifts that the Lord gave me in my new season as a wife and a mother. And so I think I would look at young women and say, like, we can dream big. We don't have to be on the extreme of this trad wife life mentality where you can't dream big, but you also don't have to dream so big and just think of life as one fluid motion that you can't go, I'm going to dream big for the glory of God, but I'm also going to look at life and go, this season suits this better. So for my life right now, being in the legislature wasn't the best option for having a little boy. I didn't want to put him in a daycare every day. People in the legislature looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, why are you leaving? And I said, because I want to be the one that makes my little boy pancakes every single morning. I don't want someone else to do that for me. And so I think for women in today's culture, they're scared of dreaming big because they don't want the boss babe wife. But they're also not going to settle for having chickens and making sourdough at home every single day. And so I think the alternative option is dreaming big for the glory of God, but also looking, going, life is full of very different seasons. And if we hold that season with an open hand, then we're going to live to the fullness in that. And I think as women, that's how we're going to make the most cultural change as well, right? Like in politics, I change policy all the time, and that affected the next generation. But right now, like, changing the next generation is changing my little boy's diaper and raising him to know truth and to know what the Bible speaks about and to see America truly as like that shining city on a hill. And so I think like if we can look at women and present this differing option, I think it's going to give them a lot of freedom to dream big and change the next generation in a big way.
Wow, that's beautifully put. I love what you said about the seasons of life, because it's true. Whenever you grow up, every single stage of your life is going to be different. And one decision that you could make in your 20s could be completely different from the decision that you should make in your 30s. Everybody's different. Everybody has different ages when seasons happen for them. So I loved your perspective on that. And can we kind of go back to speaking about your experience on the House floor? Yeah. Being a young woman, especially with so many other older people, being the youngest there is so impressive. What advantages or disadvantages did you see being a young woman in such a important role?
I think there's a lot of advantages, right? I think society wants to tell you, like, you have to fight harder, you have to be louder, you have to, all these things. No. One thing I will say is, as a woman, you have to know what you believe, you have to know why you believe it, and you have to be very firm in that. And you can't be incorrect. That's the one thing that like people really need to understand, is that you don't have room to be wrong as a woman in politics. when you say something, it does need to be 100% correct 100% of the time. And so I will say that is really important as a woman, because you're not a man. We are different, you know, we are not the same. And so you do need to understand that when you're in the legislature. But I think being a woman in politics gives you the ability to have a freedom to voice your beliefs and your opinions in a really free way. I watched a lot of men that are, you know, they're all in the same age group. And I always say, like, whether you're 50 years old or 5 years old, guys kind of all act the same when they're in a pack. It's true. Like, It's true. It's like they get together and they're just like these goofy, funny selves that are always like fighting for who's the top dog. And it was interesting because it happened in every room that I walked in. But as a woman, when you walked in, I actually had a freedom to go, I'm not trying to drive for who's the top dog of the guys group. I don't care that they're not asking me out for pizza and beer and all these different things that they go and do every evening. And it gave me a lot of freedom to go, I can believe what I believe and I can voice it in a really strong manner because I don't need to be part of the good old boys club. Mm-hmm. And I think if more people understood that and were okay with saying, I'm okay being on the outs because what I believe matters, I think people in politics would not only go a lot further, but the things that we believe would get done a lot quicker.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think you spoke a little bit about like the heartbeat bill and your women's sports, which I actually watched the video of you kind of speaking up like with this bill for women's sports, and you know, you were getting like booed and people were being very loud in that aspect and kind of fighting back on that. So just seeing your courage there was very cool. But besides, you did speak about the heartbeat bill. Were there any sort of real change that sort of happened that you were there for, that you were, like, played a part in besides the heartbeat bill? Because that's already a very, very big thing. Or things that you started seeing developing and then you kind of stepped back. Like what's the future for state politics?
No, totally. So there is so much good that can be happening in states right now. I think for a long time, states were overlooked. I think a lot of people looked at Congress and said, like, that's where the real change happens in Washington, D.C. And I think some of the media plays into that, right? There is a lot more media coverage on what happens in Congress, and what people see, people can understand. And I always say, like, older people, because I represented a little bit older demographic in my region, is older people watch the news like young girls watch the Kardashians. And I would always say, like, society, we got to stop watching the news in that manner. Like, it's unhealthy. It's not moving forward what we believe in. It's creating politicians that we really don't want because they're in it for the, you know, the big speeches and the loud words, but not actually behind the scenes and the hard work of getting things done. But I think with the overturn of Roe, actually, so when Roe was overturned, a lot of the power went back to the states when it came to pro-life policies and legislation. And I think since then, there's been a large focus. And as well, I'll add in, when COVID hit our nation, people didn't know who their governor was. They didn't know who their state rep was. They didn't know who their state senator was. But when all of a sudden during COVID in 2020, 2021 time, when certain states were literally shut down, you couldn't even go to the grocery store without, you know, having the orders from the governor. But then other states were 100% opened and not acting as if COVID wasn't a real thing. Like, people started really paying attention to their state legislatures. They started saying, oh, who's our governor and what are they actually doing? And so I think those two things together, both the pro-life with the overturn of Roe as well as COVID, like, those two things made people really hyper-focus on what's actually happening in my state. Because what's happening in Congress is important, but what's happening in your state legislature affects your day-to-day life so much more. And so I think a lot of people in the community started looking and going, wait, we want our church doors open during COVID. We want our businesses open. We don't want our kids blocked out of schools. When Roe was overturned, there were so many pro-life individuals in states across the nation that said, we don't want abortion in our state. You know, we don't want that to be happening. And so we've had a hyper focus on legislatures across the nation. And I think in a really good way. I've seen, at least in Ohio, there's been a big change in the legislature of far more like conservative, pro-life, pro-family individuals that have run for office and come in and who are like fighting to make a change. And I think instead of the status quo that has been happening for so long in states, people are truly looking at them, and legislators are looking at them and saying, we want school choice in our state. We want pro-life policies. We want to ban abortion overall. And that is really making a big difference in states across the nation.
Wow. Yeah. And with that, how can people get more involved in their state politics? Is there ways that they can voice their concerns? What would you suggest? And what would that look like for young women like you who got involved in it, who want to kind of follow in your footsteps and look to you as a role model for what they want to do in their career? How would you suggest they go about that?
So there was one day in Columbus that like really stuck out with me. It was in caucus. So caucus is where all the Republican members get together in a room and we discuss what's going to be happening on the House floor before it goes to the floor. So we're all there in discussion, and there was a bill I was very passionate about. I wanted to see it voted on the floor. And this gentleman in the front of the room stands up, holds up his hand, and he was like, "My phone has been ringing off the hook. You can't vote through this today. We haven't looked at it enough." Keep in mind, this bill had been looked at for a very long time. He's like, "My phone is ringing off the hook. Don't vote this through. Don't move it through." I'm like sitting there. I'm like, okay. So then I stood up. I said, "How many people have actually called your office?" Right? He said, "Well, let me text my legislative aide." He texts his aide, 5 people. 5 people called this man's office, and he is talking to 66 Republicans saying, "Don't move this bill through because my phone is ringing off the hook." Right? And so I think people need to understand how powerful their voice is. I think a lot of people go, "Well, if I call in because I'm pro-life, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about this bill number and this bill number." And I tell people all the time, it's not your job to understand every single bill. You hired your legislator to understand like every piece of that legislation, but it is your job to voice your opinion. And so you can literally use AI, you can use Google, just be like, "Who's my state representative in this area of this state? And then what's their phone number?" Call them up and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I believe in pro-life policies. I want you to defend the unborn in our state. Would you do that?" It's as simple as that. If you want to get more complex, like there are other groups, like your state has a family policy group. You could call them and say, "What pro-life bills are moving through the legislature?" Okay, great. Email. What's my state rep's email? Email them and say, "Hey, I'm passionate about this bill. Would you be willing to move that through the process and vote yes on it?" So some things are as simple as like using your voice, texting them, calling them, emailing them, and saying, "Here's what I believe and here's why I believe that." And then, you can run for office as well. I think for a lot of people, running for office feels like this far out there thing, right? And, but it's far more doable than what you would think, right? The legislature is made up of everyday individuals that know what they believe, know why they believe it, and then decided to take a leap of faith and put themselves out there. When I was campaigning, if you go back and look at pictures, I have the chunkiest cheeks. I look like a child. I'm very young. I'm 23, 24 years old at that time. And you would think that it was just this big, easy win. But no, it was really hard. There was a 4-way primary. And one of the first events I ever went to was a Lincoln Day dinner. And I was very insecure, very nervous. But, you're just like, okay, you put on your suit jacket. That's probably ill-fitting, but you're doing the best you can. And I go to this event, and I'd done sales before that because my brother and I owned a company. And I knew how to go like door to door and talk to people. And so I got to this event. I look around, and like everybody had like these stickers on for my opponent. I mean, probably 90% of the room. They'd already decided who they were voting for, right? But I didn't know what to do because I'm new. I'd already put in all my signatures to vote. And so I decided, okay, I know how to go door to door, so I'm going to go table to table and just talk to people. So I go to the first table and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Jena. I'm running for office. You should think about voting for me. Here's what I believe in." And so I go table to table, and then about halfway through, I'm like gaining confidence. You know how like you just feel that confidence swelling
the
up
courage.
in your soul?
Yeah, I got it.
The courage is going in your soul. And I go to this guy and I say, "Hi, I'm Jena. I'm running for office." And he looks at me, and keep in mind, it was not because I was a female that he says this. It's because I looked like a child, right? And he looks at me and he pats me on the shoulder and he says, "It's so cute that you're running for office. Maybe you'll win in the future." And I remember like all of my courage just deflated in my soul. I was like, "Well, I am pathetic." But you're there. I had my pearls on, you're just trying to act all older and fancy because I believed in something. I wanted to fight for it. I wanted to be the voice for it. And so I looked at the gentleman and I said, "No, like I'm going to win this time, and I'm going to do the very best I can. And so, we went on and we knocked doors, we hosted events, we raised money. And truly, when the Lord calls you to something, he will open every door that you need. And I won a 4-way primary with almost 50% of the vote.
Wow.
And that's just the Lord truly going, if this is where I'm calling you, not only I'm going to make it I'm not going to make it a small win. I'm going to make it a big win.
Let's landslide it.
Yeah, let's landslide it. And that gave me a lot of confidence to go, I talked to my community that I was going to fight for life, that I was going to fight for lower taxes, less regulations, more freedom for families in my community. And that gave me a lot of freedom to then go into the legislature and say, I don't care what you are trying to push me in what direction. I know what my community believes. And they sent me here as a 25-year-old female. And surely I'm going to do the very, very, very best I can to deliver what I told the people I would do. And so whether you're 18 or 25 or 50 years old, you can run for office. You can gather the signatures. You can raise the money. You can go and knock on doors. If you know what you believe, if you know why you believe it, and if you feel like the Lord is really calling you to that, don't be afraid. What? So what? You lose. You weren't anything before. It's not
it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world. You lose, you move on, But if you win, the chances of getting to make a very big difference in your state are astronomical. And it's a very amazing thing to do.
And what a good use of that, like you said, that season of life that you were in, because you were able to do that with, the time and resources, energy that you had. I think more young people, have a lot of time and resources and energy. And I think that could be a good use, people's resources. Because when you're young, you have so many opportunities in front of you.
Yeah.
And me, recent graduate, when you graduate, you have all these doors.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people shut the running for office door because it seems so scary.
Yeah.
So hearing from you and just being it's really, there's not so much to lose. It's doable. Things like that is very, very helpful, I think, for the younger generation.
I think a lot of women, if I'm going to be quite frank, shut the running for office door. It's because they're scared of what they think the future could be in that, right? If I run for office young, then I'm going to be a grizzled 50-year-old in a suit with a briefcase and hate my life. I'm honest. I actually think that's what people see. And they go, I don't want that. But I think what the picture we want to paint for women is that you can dream big and you can hold your life open-handed. And that means every season is going to look different. I get to be a wife and a mother. I've been a business owner. I still own a company. I was in the legislature, and all of those things came at different times. But if we hold so tightly onto the image that we think we want long-term, people thought I was crazy when I got out. They thought you're going to be in the state Senate, then you're going to run for Congress, and then you're going to be governed, then you're going to be president. That's what they think, right? Yeah. That's what people think, that when you're there, and then they push you in that direction. But I think it's okay to be you know what? I'm going to be faithful to where the Lord has called me today. And when that season is over, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to walk into the next season with boldness and courage, knowing that the same Lord that was faithful in this season is going to be just as faithful in the next. And if you don't want to be in a pantsuit with a briefcase at 50 or 40 years old, that's not a desire on your heart. You don't have to be. You're allowed to run for office and be there for 2 years or 4 years, but also don't undermine that the Lord might change the thoughts in your heart or the passions in your soul. And you have to be okay with what that might look like for the next 5, 10, or 20 years. Because I think if I found anything is that when we walk in the way of the Lord, we will find true fulfillment and we'll find courage and we'll make lasting change in our home and in our state and in our nation.
So true. You mentioned you own a company right now, currently. That's incredible. So how did you kind of balance being a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur, a CEO? How do you balance all of that when, like you mentioned earlier, there's seasons of your life when you have a child, stuff like that. So how do you balance that?
So you can do a lot of things in life, but you can't do everything at once. I think that's more than anything what people need to understand. I started my first company when I was 17 years old. I started college when I was 13 years old. Yeah.
You had a very busy teenage years.
A little burnout. Yeah. No, but you can't do everything at once. Everyone wants to be I will say social media makes it seem like a woman is a CEO, leads music at our church, is a politician, is a mom, a mother, makes whole wheat pancakes for her kids every Saturday morning. She doesn't. I'm just here to tell you, like, she doesn't. I know a lot of incredible moms, the best moms. You can't do all those things. Mm-hmm. You have to choose what is most important to you in this season. My dad would always say you can do 2 things well, maybe 3 if you have enough resources and help to make that happen. So, can I do business and be a mom? Yes. Could I be a politician and be a mom? Yes. Can I be a business owner, a politician, a mom, a wife? No. That is too many things to practically do it in a way that I want. Mm-hmm. I don't want to send my kid to daycare every single day and have someone raise my child instead of myself and only see them for 2 hours every evening. That might be a decision that another mom makes, and that might be right for her. But for me, that's not what I feel like the Lord is calling me to in this season. My husband's in real estate. He's very, very busy with that. If I wanted to be in politics plus business plus have a child and my husband in real estate, that's fine, but we would never see each other. Mm-hmm. So how great is it to be married to someone that you would never see? Mm-hmm. Probably pretty bad, which is probably why most people are getting divorced nowadays, right? And so I think I would just look, and you have to be like, what has the Lord given to me in this season? And how can I faithfully do the very best I can with it? And like, as women, we are creative humans. We have a lot of energy as well as women. And we actually are very good at juggling different things. But I think social media has painted this picture of women that they can be everything and do everything at all times. And I'm just here to tell you, like, you can't. Boss babe culture has wore people out. But you can do more than just like sit at home with a chicken, you know? So I think that there is that balance of going like in prayer, if you're married with your child, and going like, what resources do I have at this time? And what are my first priorities? So in my life right now, my first priority is my relationship with the Lord, my husband, and my son. Those are my first things. And then out of excess, I get to do things like this, right? Yeah. I get to come and talk to young women and speaking at an event tomorrow. And that's out of excess of me and my husband in our conversations going, my little boy's doing great. He gets to spend time with Grammy right now. And I get to come and do things like this that give me life. Because I do think like as a mom and as a wife, like you got a lot of energy. You have a lot of passions. You have a lot of things that you believe in. And so if you can find ways to make that work with the season that you're in, like that's like truly incredible. Yeah. But I would look at most women and say like, get off of social media because most of those accounts are fake.
Yeah, I also think with social media too, it paints a fake picture. Mm-hmm. Like what you're saying, and with TikTok and Instagram, I mean, that's generation that we grew up in.
Yeah.
And there's other generations that didn't have the internet and all these social media platforms. And it is painting a false picture that we are looking up to now and saying, well, they're doing it on a video. Mm-hmm. I think can do it in real life, which I think we need to start realizing that social media, it's fake. You can curate whatever you want to be portrayed through your different platforms. So that's a very interesting point.
Yeah. But I think it's very unfair to women as well, right? Yeah. Like we can do a lot of things. We can dream big. We can start businesses. We can run for office. But to act as though we can do it all at one time, it's just really not possible. And it's not sustainable long term. Yeah. You can do it for a little while, but there's a reason that so many millennials are burnt out. Their marriages are crashing and their kids are out of control. Why? It's because they're not there for their kids. They haven't invested in their husband, and they can only do this life for so long.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate too, because a lot of women are posting their lives, and it's almost like they're leading the younger generation astray.
Yeah.
Because it's like these women that are, doing all the things supposedly, that are posting these things like the day in the lives and things like that. And it's just hard because they're the ones that are kind of not being super helpful to the future and to the girls that are looking up to them. But
yeah. Women can do more than what people think.
Mm-hmm.
But
and we're talented. Like you use your talents,
the season that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that is probably what's most important to women right now in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And going back to, you've always been very passionate about the pro-life movement. Now you have a little baby. It's very exciting. Where do you see, obviously now we're post-Roe, we're up to the states now. Where do you see the pro-life generation, pro-life movement in the next 10 years? What would you predict if you had a crystal ball? Where do you think it's going?
Good. So I did March for Life. So I went to my first ever March for Life in Washington, D.C. many years ago. And I was always pro-life before that. But when I went, I remember standing out. It's always freezing cold at the time. I'm freezing cold. But I remember standing there and a speaker said, over 60 million, this was years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Over 60 million children have been aborted since Roe versus Wade. And that was actually the catalyst for doing something in my life and truly making a difference when it comes to pro-life policies. Because I literally sat there and I'm like, I can't sit idly by while 60 million children have been killed from abortion. And I think in today's world, like, first off, we need to fight for what is good and true, right? We need to stand up for the unborn. There is a lot of new technology that's coming in when it comes to in vitro fertilization and artificial reproductive technology that is really changing kind of the pro-life movement a little bit and the ways that we need to fight to end abortion. But there's a lot of different ways to do that. I think right now we're in the first quarter of a post-Roe America. You know, what happened was Roe got overturned. A lot of states and their state legislatures weren't prepared for all of this money to flow into their state. In Ohio and several other states, the legislature, we did not act quick enough, and abortion is enshrined now in our state constitution. A lot of people want to believe that, like, oh, people are lied to. They don't understand abortion. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that, because it used to be like, is this baby really a human? Like, back in the day when I was little, that was the debate. But the debate has come so far from there. Now it's my body, my choice. It's not, do I think it's a baby or not? It's, I don't care if it's a baby, and it's my body, my choice. Yeah. And so I think people need to, first off, like, understand that, like, people want what they want when they want it, when it comes to sex and abortion and their choices of what they do. And I think, like, we're going to always be losing until we actually come to that realization as pro-lifers that, like, people want what they want when they want it. I don't think they're really lied to. It's that they want to end a life because it's inconvenient to them. And so when it comes to the pro-life movement in states specifically, you know, we need to have a lot more conversations with women to go, hey, like, there are resources available for you. That is true. But also, abortion is murder and abortion is wrong. And you are taking the life of an unborn child. And then ultimately, we need to raise up the next generation to understand that life is valuable and life is meant to be protected. Because I do think after a certain amount of time, people have become so callous to the abortion issue and to having abortions, to taking mifepristone, that they just don't care anymore. And so I do think, like, first off, we're in the first quarter of a post-Roe America. And so I think it's like, I think a lot of states are very in a frustrated spot because they now have abortion enshrined in their constitution. But I think what I would tell people is, like, it took a very long time to overturn Roe. And so don't be dismayed. Don't be discouraged. We just need to come at the fight in a different manner in the states and say, okay, with this knowledge, there's a lot of states that have reporting coming out right now about the family, why people are wanting abortion, why it's enshrined in the Constitution. I think we really need to dig into those numbers in states across the nation and form a better plan moving forward. Because it's not the end of the story in states where it is enshrined in the Constitution. And I think there are states right now that are teaching children that life does begin in the womb. And they're teaching them the baby Olivia with live action. They're teaching them the developmental steps on week 1 of pregnancy and week 10. And I mean, think about a generation of children that are raised knowing that, hey, at this many weeks, your baby can hear. And at this many weeks, your baby can feel. And at this many weeks, your baby can taste in the womb. Like, that's going to make a huge difference in that generation of children. And so I think it's like, don't be dismayed, but let's continue the fight to end abortion. Let's continue the fight to figure out everything with artificial reproductive technology and in vitro fertilization and all these frozen embryos, because the fight's not over. I think it's truly just beginning in states.
Yeah. What would your advice be to young Gen Z women and listeners today? Like, what would your advice be to them who are passionate about this pro-life movement? What can they do today, tomorrow, next month that will actively promote the pro-life movement?
I love that question. So I think first off, if you're in college, join your Students for Life group there. I just spoke at one and there was almost 300 kids that showed up, which was incredible. I think there's a lot of campuses that are on fire for supporting moms and protecting the unborn. But the Students for Life chapter, they do a great job at getting you accurate and good information, because I think education is really important. I think that's the first thing, is like, there's so much new information on artificial reproductive technology, in vitro fertilization, mifepristone, like all these different pills and drugs that I think it's important that you understand. So I would say go join your Students for Life Club. If you don't have one on campus, maybe you can call up Students for Life and start one. But also understand what resources your community and your state has for vulnerable women. I get that a lot. Like people are like, well, I'm pro-life, which is awesome. And they go and tell everybody that, but then maybe they don't have like, well, if a mother is in crisis, what resources are available? Not only do churches provide resources, but also pregnancy resource centers are an amazing source of information, as well as your state. There's a lot of state resources that we in Ohio have allocated to hurting and single moms, to young children, because we want to see children thrive in the state of Ohio. And then last but not least, like a very practical way would be volunteer at your pregnancy resource center on Saturday mornings. You can fold clothes, you can help with lawn care if you're a guy and you're not really into all that stuff. Like they have boxes to move, because a lot of these centers are run by women. So there's always things. Maybe you're handy with a hammer. There are things that you can go to do to help these resource centers that truly help vulnerable women and children.
Yeah, that's awesome. And unfortunately, we're out of time. But really quick, where can people find you? Where can people support you and the work that you are doing?
I love it. Yeah. So they can follow me on Instagram. It's just at Jena Powell. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Go follow me, DM me. I would love to have a deeper conversation. Maybe something you heard on here you totally agree with. Maybe something you don't. Let's start the conversation, and start the conversation specifically around empowering women to like be everything that the Lord has made them to be, but also be true to the season the Lord has for them.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jena.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.